Hi everyone, my name is Phoenix Wildfire and welcome to the Messiness of Everything, a podcast that is literally just about the human experience. Everything I've experienced, everything I wish to experience, everything I wish to never experience again. And the whole idea of this podcast is to celebrate the messiness of us as human beings, to step away from the perfectionism, hence the makeup today, which just if you can see it on the video, wow. I realised at the last moment I didn't want it and I just decided to smudge it off, and this is the effect. But this is what the podcast is about. I really want to step away from perfectionism and just really dive deep into the human condition, into the emotionality, the psychological aspects, down to the physical, the spiritual. So this podcast is not limited at all to specific subjects, specific topics. This is really just my lived experience as somebody who I believe is almost 37, or am I almost 38? I actually don't know. And I'm not going to figure out live on this podcast. And to be honest, I'm starting with the ground. I'm starting running from the ground. What is that phrase? I don't even know what that phrase is. There we go. The first messiness I messed up 35 seconds in. Today's episode is a big one for me because it is something that has been the underlying theme, topic. It's been the way I've conducted my life, and I've made so many decisions based on this, and I never honestly thought I would ever do a podcast or I'd even make a decision to change the narrative that I've been living with for the past 20 years. So this episode is really about me talking you through how and why right now I have transitioned away from a predominantly, completely 100% based plant-based diet, following all of the vegan philosophies that I'm aware of, that I've been educated on, why I've moved away from this at the moment in time. And I can never say for now, as in I plan to go backwards or back to veganism. I have no idea what life brings me. I never even imagined being in a space, sitting here talking to people about the fact that I've eaten animal products. Whereas even as little as 6 months ago, this would not have even been a thing I would even have entertained. And this may cause quite a lot of interesting commentary, shall we say. It may not receive anything at all. But I really wanted to talk you through my experience as somebody who morally and ethically believes that animals should not be murdered for consumption, hence why I use the words such as murdered, and also the same person who's holding the contradiction of eating products that have been a product of murder, abuse, etc. And I say this really calmly because I mean, if I get emotional, I get emotional. I want to promote emotions. But I'm just really teaching you or showing you or highlighting to you the actual ability some people can have to hold opposing viewpoints. There's a lot of stuff going on with cancel culture where one single view from somebody can have everybody ganging up against this person or completely turning their back against a person they love. It may be a celebrity of theirs, for example. I'm not well versed at all in celebritydom, whatever the word is. And one celebrity, somebody may revel, and all of a sudden they say one thing or one viewpoint comes out or one song comes out that's not particularly liked. And I have a lot of people, or see a lot of people just completely turning their back and unfollow. I'm gonna block this person. I'm gonna unfollow this person because I disagree with this particular sentiment. And this is what seems to be reoccurring a lot nowadays, predominantly through trauma and this whole idea of black and white thinking, of the brain being traumatized to a level that they're not able to hold, or the brain's not able to hold ambiguity, able to sit in the middle and go, hey, I really love this person and I disagree with some of the things they say. It's either this person is all bad or good. And so this is what I kind of also wanted to showcase today, that there is the possibility of being able to sit in that gray. And this is from somebody who up to 6 months ago was very much vegan and had been since 25 years, 26 years. So it's not been an easy transition, and there's a lot of reasons behind it. So I'm going to take you all the way back to the beginning of the story. And the beginning of the story would have happened in the womb. I will do a lot of podcasts on my understanding of my experience of being in the womb, my experience of being a baby, my attachment wounding, the neglect I experienced, the abuse I experienced. This will all come out. And I'm going to be very, very transparent about it because I've done so much healing work on it, and I've reached a place where I'm really, really okay with my past for the most part. But because of my upbringing, because of trauma, because of imprinting, because of attachment wounding, because of all the experiences I had early on, when I hit around the age of 13, or this is at least the earliest really that I can remember predominantly, I began to develop what would later be known as anorexia. I mean, I put a label on it now, but ultimately I was just experiencing really dysfunctional patterns of behavior and beliefs around food. And I do remember, for example, very early memories. There's one that's come up right now, which was, I can't remember how old I was, maybe 8, 9. And my dad and I had gone with my brother to see a couple of my dad's friends. And I remember distinctively them bringing out a big plate of chocolate biscuits. I don't know if they were all chocolate biscuits, but I remember there being chocolate digestives. And the plate was placed on the table, and myself and my brother were told, help yourself. And I don't remember who enabled who, or whether it was just, I don't remember. All I know next was the parent, my dad and his friends coming back and going, oh my goodness, you guys ate the whole plate. And I don't know who ate more. But then I remember driving back in the car with my dad, and I felt really sick. I can't remember if it was myself who vomited or my brother, but one of us did. And then getting back home, and then again being sick. I must have been younger than 8, because I believe it was my old house, the original house that I used to live in. And we moved out of there in October of 1992, which would have meant that I was 5 or 6 at the time. Wow, okay. Either way, I overindulged in chocolate biscuits. And that's really one of the only memories I have of my early existence. Again, this is another video altogether. I do have other memories that are kind of scattered about around Christmas time, being fixated and obsessed with the chocolate I would get, for example, in Santa's stocking, or eating. I was just obsessed with eating food. I know now through stories as well, I was put on a diet at 18 months because I was considered to be, and I don't like this word because I don't believe in the BMI. I think it's really, it's stooped in prejudice and oppression, but the word would be used as obese. I, looking at pictures now, have no idea what they were talking about. I was just a little chunky 18-month-year-old, but I remember, long story short, and I now know, as my adult perspective knows, that I was trying to get the love that I wasn't receiving in the way that I needed it to through food. And so I became obsessed with food. So bring it back again to about the age of 13, I was at college. I remember, I don't know what started it, but I started to skip breakfast. I don't remember if it was intentional to begin with at first or not, but I remember feeling really good about my body when it was empty, when there wasn't food present. My stomach felt flatter, I felt smaller, and therefore at that time, I felt I was worthy of more, and I had more confidence, and I felt like I could engage with other people more confidently when I didn't have a bloated stomach or a stomach that was full of food. And this is something that I'm still working on and navigating now, hence why this podcast is coming out, where I still feel very uncomfortable feeling full. The fullness of taking up space, right? So 13 years old, started to skip breakfast because of the situation at home. It wasn't really monitored, so I was able to get away with it. And then I'd often go days without eating properly. Now, as you know, as teenagers go, our metabolisms are often through the roof, and we need to eat a lot of food because we are growing. And I was clearly under eating at that point. And then I would under eat to the point where I become super hungry. And at the time, I also did awful things in stealing £1 from, my mum's purse at some point, because I became fixated on sweets and chocolate and wanting to get all those foods I wasn't allowed. And I would often come to school and spend that £1 on, I remember distinctively, in the canteen, because I also remember actually coming to school without a lunch. I don't remember if it was because by this point in high school, it was kind of seen as a, hey, make your own lunch. I just remember not really coming to school with food. And I can't pinpoint who was behind that, whether it was just me choosing not to take food and they were making me lunch and I was just not taking it, whether it was kind of left to my own devices to make it, whatever the reason was. I remember coming to school and it'd get to lunchtime and I hadn't eaten anything. And me being 12, 13, 14, I was ravenous. And I used to become fixated on spending my pound on the two things I remember, which were these iced buns that were just like these long hot dog sort of buns filled with jam and cream, or from the vending machine they often had these Terry's chocolate orange bars, but there was often two stacked in one packet. And I used to take those and I used to eat them in the afternoon in lessons, because, you know, my lessons at the time were often very boring. And so I remember also thinking about it, if there was times when I didn't have food in my pocket for the afternoon, I'd actually become really disappointed. There was actually, I could feel this feeling and this disappointment was running through my time at high school, where it's like I was always wanting those sweet foods. And yeah, even I had a friend at the time who was collecting M&Ms from across the world, and I think she often had lots imported, and she had the very mini M&Ms, and at break time she'd often put them all in a bowl and we'd all sit around and talk and eat. And I just remember being fixated on how many I could get and put them in my pocket for the middle lessons between break and lunchtime. So by this point I was very highly focused on food. Then I went to college, and it was around the age of 15 I was at college that things started to get worse, because now I was not eating for days and days on end, living on water, sometimes like Diet Coke or something to kind of fill me up with the bubbles. And I remember there was one moment when I hadn't eaten in 4 or 5 days, and I was walking up to the bus stop to get the bus home, and I almost collapsed, almost fainted, and it really terrified me because I realized I was by myself and I was too embarrassed to ask anyone to help me. And in that moment, because I had money on me for whatever reason, I walked to a little corner shop and I bought some chocolates, some cakes, whatever it wasn't healthy, because I was really scared about how overwhelmed I'd felt in the idea that I was going to faint in this moment or something was going to happen to me. But then I continued this really unhealthy pattern of food. I remember my mum used to buy these half moon cakes that were like really big, like half a cake. And sometimes I would get through 2 of them in a 20-minute sitting. And because I was starving myself, I then started going between the not eating for 4 or 5 days and then binge eating a lot. Like, I can remember in the space of an hour, like 8 yogurts, followed by 2 massive half moon cakes, followed by half a tub of ice cream, followed by 20 packets of crisps, followed by a Linda McCartney spinach and ricotta cannelloni frozen thing, followed by a load of chips and ice creams and just blocks of cheese, which was my dad's favorite at the time. So my relationship with food was really, really unhealthy. Now, on New Year's Eve of when I was 15, so I'm not even going to guess the ages, I just have a mystery age now, I decided to go vegetarian. And I don't know who sparked my interest in this, because I didn't have any friends who are vegetarians. None of my family are vegetarians at all. So at the time, we didn't have all the access to the internet so much, and Google and YouTube. So I don't know how or why that was sparked, but I do remember in part it was sparked because obviously my understanding, I didn't want to consume animals. So I had my last meal, my last meat, which was the worst I could possibly have chosen, but at the time it was my favorite, which was a KFC Twister wrap. And then I went vegetarian. Now, of course, both parents were really not on board with it. I was told that it was a phase. You're gonna put so much more, pressure on my mum to cook another meal, because I already had a sister who was, really struggling to eat various types of food, and then other people wanted different things, and she was already cooking 2 or 3 different meals. So often what would actually happen is I would get the same meal as everybody else, just minus the meat, which was okay because I loved vegetables, I still do. But ultimately I wasn't getting enough in the way of carbohydrates and proteins. At the time I didn't know, I was 15. And in fact, even both my parents didn't really probably have a good understanding of nutrition so much. They just thought, hey, she's getting food in her mouth, she's eating in some way. But that already started what would later very quickly escalate into me becoming very pale, losing my hair. I mean, my hair has never ever fully forgiven me and come back to full strength. The fact that I'm now dyeing it again and I'm living in a tropical country doesn't help. But yeah, already I was starting down the route of malnutrition, amongst the fact that I wasn't eating enough and I was starving myself for days on end. I don't really know how I managed to get away with that so much. I think maybe I used to make excuses to spend the evenings with my friends, because had I been at home, I'm pretty sure one of my parents would have noticed I wasn't eating. So I must have done something, because I do remember distinctively not eating for days on end and feeling really proud about that. So anyway, I went vegetarian. Fast forward, let's go a bit quicker. 4 years time, 19, at university, I was dared to go vegan in a Subway in Ealing Broadway. And me liking dares and thinking, okay, why not? I went vegan. Now, of course, in the first couple of years of going vegan, I did read up on it and I realized actually I really stand by the morals and ethics here, but ultimately I did it mostly for a dare. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this all with you is to get to the kind of main point of where I'm at right now, which is the last couple of years on my healing journey. I've noticed one of the big elements of this is my relationship to my body. Predominantly, my relationship to my body is really healthy. I have a lot of self-esteem, I have a lot of self-worth. I've done a lot of work on my relationship to myself, to my body, to who I am, to life, to people. I've done a lot of work. I consider myself to be a very healthy individual on the most part. And I still have insecurities around my stomach in particular. This has always been a huge thing for me. And although I was on my healing journey and healing from everything else, I noticed there was this underlying unhealthy behavior patterns, thoughts regarding the food choices I make. So I was still, for example, I always felt better when I ate less. And I noticed this was a big thing. And although I was training at the gym, and I'm still training at the gym, I'm still lifting weights, I know that I've still been undernourishing myself and still feeling better when I'm a specific size. And for me, this is always something I thought this has got to be addressed, but not right now. Right now, I'm trying to, for example, heal from the abuse I went through, understand all my attachment woundings, understanding the abandonment wound, understanding the neglect wound, understanding insecurities in every other facet of my life and how to heal from these so I have really robust, strong connections with others and myself, or myself and others. And so I've literally, since 2019, having come out of an abusive space, been healing so many elements of myself, really like fast tracking what a lot of people would take a lifetime to do simply because I had no choice. I was in a space of absolute dysregulation and all of my emotions and all of my trauma was just there. So it wasn't something that I thought was something I needed to address straight away. Even though I could see those patterns were still impacting me in different ways. I still wasn't quite ready to address that. I just thought I need a break. And earlier this year, I was like, I just need a break from healing. I've been doing this for 3 years now. It's become my lifestyle. It's what I also do in holding retreats and working with one-to-ones. And, you know, I was working at an addiction clinic. So I was like, I just need a break. I will do this. Now, another thing I was really honest with myself about was that partly why I needed to wait as well was I felt that I needed to heal my relationship with my body whilst in a healthy relationship with a man. And the reason being is because although I was going out there not giving a fuck, I was going out dancing 3-4 times a week by myself, wearing what people would class as provocative clothing. I would just dress to show my body in a way that I wished to for myself and my pleasure. Other people would take notice, of course. And I wasn't actively doing it to gain the attention of men, because that would probably also rein in the wrong type of man for me. I was just going out there and loving life and feeling really great in my skin. But I also recognized that there was just this very small, minute part that was doing it for the entertainment or the interest of men. This is a big thing I'll talk about on my social media, is that women as a whole, at least myself, the people in my life, we have been centralized around men and around men's desires. It's so deeply ingrained we don't realize it, that we apologize for taking up too much space if it makes a man uncomfortable. We're not even aware we're doing this. And we have been conditioned to believe that, you know, our life is about being chosen by a man, and we should be, you know, grateful when a man approaches us and gives us attention. It doesn't matter if we're not interested in that man or we wish to stay single because actually we want to be single. It's frowned upon. It's seen as, you're just weird. Why would you want to not actively be with a man? When my experiences and other podcasts with men overall has been very, very unhealthy. And I'm just grateful that my heart is still very much open to receiving the love of a healthy man when the time is right. But because we have been, or I should only speak for myself, because I have been so centralized around the attention of men and being chosen by men, there is still that small part of me that feels very uncomfortable healing that part of myself whilst out of relationship with a healthy man. So earlier this year, I noticed these patterns. I identified them, but I also made that choice, not right now. This is not something I'm going to deal with right now. It's I would say, I mean, earlier this year, I did reach the lowest weight I was. I wasn't starving myself, but I was definitely permanently in a deficit. At the same time, I was going out dancing 2, 3, 4 times a week. I was going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. I was a very active person. So I was very, very small, the smallest I've been. Some of my pictures I will post on Instagram will show you very clearly the 6-pack. I was very, very lean, but I was feeling amazing. I was feeling like energized. And sometimes some people's bodies, myself included, actually like being a little bit stressed in that way. Not super stressed, but a little bit just gives us that ability to function at possibly a higher level than if we are slightly less stressed, right? So I made the decision earlier this year to hold off on healing my relationship with my body and food just yet. I needed a break. I had other things to do. I wanted to try and move away into the fashion industry and start having all my creative endeavors that didn't always involve the healing space. And that's when I began to reflect on some of the choices I'd made earlier in life. Those choices being in particular the vegetarianism and the veganism. As I said, I have been vegan since I've been 19, so we're talking 25, 26 years. I've been vegetarian 4 more years on top of that, and I've always believed, and I still do, the morals and ethics surrounding the consumption or the non-consumption of animal products. And it was during this time when I really started to reflect on this, and what came to me in many healing spaces was part of the reason I went vegan and vegetarian was for the moral side of things. That was like the cover, that was like the protective layer, right? And I do embody these principles. And part of why I went vegan and vegetarian was a way of me restricting my food. Going vegetarian meant that all of a sudden I've cut out a food group. And going vegan meant that I cut out a hell of a lot of food. I mean, I'm 19 when I go vegan. We're talking 26 years ago. Veganism, plant-based living was not in any way the same caliber that it is now. So for me, I had to write off certain foods because, you know, the vegan alternatives back then were disgusting. I remember vegan cheese distinctively. I can still feel the consistency and see the wet little like block of crap. And the smell and the taste was horrific. So I just went, okay, well, I guess I don't eat cheese anymore. And the chocolate was, 2 out of 10. So I guess I just have to either have really on par chocolate or I just go without. And often I'd go without. So looking back, I realized, and this was like, I remember the moment when it kind of landed in the body for me, where I was like, oof, okay, I need to be honest with myself here. I went vegan and vegetarian for more than one reason. And one of the main reasons underneath was this restrictive philosophy, this idea that I wasn't worthy of being nourished. And I had to be as small as possible to take up at least the least amount of space I possibly could. Now that on a cognitive level is really difficult to process, to be that honest with yourself, which I've been my entire healing career, shall we say. The last 4 years, I've been brutally honest with some of the stuff that's come up for me. And I sat with that for a while and it was shocking and I had a few tears. And then earlier this year, or not even earlier this year, a few months ago, I met an individual who I genuinely thought had come into my life to showcase what 4.5 years of healing looks like in a new relationship. This person was what I was looking for. This person appeared to offer me everything. And the interesting thing about this person was he was following a predominantly paleo diet. But yet we were on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of what we consumed food-wise, and yet we both had very similar morals and ethics with regards to animal agriculture and the impact it's having on the environment and these sorts of things. And it was really interesting. For the first time in my life, I was able to sit and listen, and there wasn't any deflection back. It was like, oh, there's this. And we had a number of really interesting discussions about his philosophy, his perspective. And it just sort of like landed to me a little bit like, oh, okay, this is weird, because usually I would just reject it. The second you said you eat animal products, I'd reject it. But yet for some reason, it just at this moment in time seemed to land. And this is where I found myself in what I thought was going to be a healthy relationship. with a man who had 12, 15 plus years of experience in nutrition and the fitness industry, who was on a completely different spectrum of me in terms of the diet and he was eating, but yet seemed to have similar morals and ethics. And in that moment, or around that time, was when I really started to recognize and really bring to the surface the fact that I had gone vegan and vegetarian partly for restriction purposes. Now, I'm a somatic therapist, and I truly embody and believe that a lot of healing has to take place in the body. We are very much, I say we, the Western philosophies and the Western practices that I have experienced are very much about being in the mind, going through cognitive processing, which can play a part in healing. But ultimately, most of the wounding we have, most of the imprints are stored in the nervous system, are stored in the body, often very much implicitly. We're not even aware they're taking place. We just repeat these patterns of tiny micro movements or micro behaviors, and then just repeat the same cycles and not understand, what have I done this time, sort of thing. I truly believe that in order to heal most woundings we have to work with the body. We have to allow the body to feel and embody, quite literally embody our earlier experiences. We have to allow sometimes space, or what I call the capacity in the nervous system, to withstand greater levels of greater tolerance levels of fear and anger and sadness, allowing these emotions to take up space in the body, allowing them to be witnessed, integrated, processed, released, whatever. And so I was, as a somatic therapist, going around working, in many spaces. And yet I was recognizing that when I talked about my veganism, my vegetarianism, I was only predominantly talking from a cognitive space. Yeah, I know, I did it. And it was around this time, in the early connection with this individual, that I started to realize I have to practice what I'm preaching with this. I have to allow my body the rights to be able to choose anything and everything that she wishes to eat. Now, if I say, okay, if you wish to eat meat, you can eat meat. If you wish to eat dairy, you can eat dairy. But actually, unconsciously, on a cognitive level, I'm saying, but we're not going to, because we want to stay vegan, vegetarian. I'm not actually truly allowing healing to take place. I'm blocking myself. I'm kidding myself into thinking that I'm really allowing myself full freedom to do exactly that. I'm still in some way restricting my body's capacity to choose what my body needs in that moment. And this is a big learning curve for me as somebody who has experienced what they would be labeled as anorexia for most of my life, and had such fucked up views and beliefs and experiences surrounding my body because of these beauty ideals. And these are all other things I'll talk about in another video. But having carried all of these most of my life, then to allow and give my body the space to choose, navigate that choice of what it is that she wants to eat, it has not been easy at all. And that's one of the things I want to make it out very clear. It's not being a case of, oh great, yes, I'm free now, I can cheat, I can go and eat whatever I want to eat, finally I can eat the chocolate bars I never had, and like it wasn't anything at all like this. I didn't feel like I was cheating myself out of anything being a vegetarian. But I just began to allow the possibility of choosing foods that have been outside of the food groups that I had up until this point not eaten for a very long time. And the interesting thing is, they always say right time, right moment. I didn't feel much of a resistance when I did this. There was almost like this curiosity, like, okay, like, am I gonna do this? Like, what am I gonna do? And that has also been something challenging for me to listen to my body right now, as you will find out in many other podcasts, but I'm going to reveal it now if I haven't said so before on my Instagram, but I am pregnant. So I'm actively engaged in trying to heal, finally finish off this eating disorder charade, so I do not carry this baby into the world with these same viewpoints that I have to, be small and not take up space, and because I know a lot about what can happen in the womb and what gets passed on there, and especially in early attachment wounding as well, which I'll talk about predominantly on my channels very vastly very soon. But to navigate allowing my body to choose what to eat and how much to eat, and watch my body changing, it is terrifying. There are moments where I'm really, really uncomfortable. And yet, because I don't want to transfer that fear onto my baby, there is also this like element of just letting go. Okay, this is it. This is what's happening. I've chosen this. This is where I want to go. So in terms of my journey into this, I want to be very mindful. And I've been predominantly mindful. There have been a few things I've not been so mindful about, but I didn't want to go into this with, okay, I'm just going to eat everything, especially, for example, in Thailand. It's much like a lot of the Western places in terms of like, a lot of the meat here is still taken from really horrific spaces. There's not a humane way to kill an animal. I want to put it out there. There's not going to be, okay, if we just give it a life, it's still killed against its will. So I want to put that out there. I'm sitting here holding opposing views, right? I have eaten some animal flesh, and I also oppose of animal flesh being created. So this is like me trying to highlight the capacity that some people can have to hold both viewpoints. But I really wanted to make sure that the quality of food I was consuming was high quality. I didn't just want to go straight in with the KFC twister. I mean, we don't have a KFC on the island, but we do have many places that are just as awful. And so my first journey started about 2 and a bit months ago, where I first consumed egg. That one felt to me the easiest one to do. And unfortunately, the first time I tried egg, the place I bought it from, it came a little bit cold. So it was like, oh, I kind of remember how this tastes like, but it wasn't like the most gratifying experience. But I do eat eggs. Now it's often actually nowhere near as it has been the last couple of months. Like at the beginning, it was like my body was like, oh my goodness, egg. I want it every day. And now I have it maybe once or twice a week, depending on the week and what I'm doing, where I'm going. And I now make sure, at least for the eggs, that I buy free range, non-antibiotic, the highest quality I can on this tiny island in Phangan, not Thailand, Koh Phangan. And I did experiment a little bit with dairy, but there is something still very, very challenging for me about drinking milk. I honestly, if somebody gave me a glass of milk or a milkshake or hot chocolate that was made of dairy milk, there's still something that I really cannot stomach that from. I don't know whether this is, growing up with a mother who used to sometimes like microwave hot milk, and we'd have hot milk before bed. There's just something about the smell of dairy that really doesn't sit well with me. I have allowed myself, for example, this is the one exception where it's not good quality. I have allowed myself some processed foods with dairy in. So I've had M&Ms, for example, just to allow my body, if it wants to experience that, here it is. My body and we're just not very keen on having like a glass of milk or something too milky. There's still something about that. And then in terms of animal flesh, because at the time I have been sort of walking the path with the individual who was on a predominantly paleo diet, he imported all of like what he classes as the non-antibiotic, grass-fed, best quality that you can get for an animal that's been murdered. And so I was predominantly and have been eating some pieces of steak that he has cooked for me. And it's a really strange process. I have had about 5, maybe 6 pieces of steak, and 4 pieces of steak and a couple of burgers from sort of a high range, again, good quality meat source. And some of the times I'm really appreciative. I'm very mindful when I'm eating them. I'm like, okay. And I thought I was going to have much more of an emotional reaction, and I haven't. And bear in mind, can I just say as well, the reason I've chosen that type of food is also because I've had a lot of health complications. I didn't even mention this part, but I've had a number of health complications the last couple of years. And I think it's partly because I'm in Thailand, and although I'm having a lot of organic veggies here and I'm eating certain food types, I feel that now that I'm healing more and more things are coming to the surface. And now it's like my body wants to rest from being hormonally all imbalanced because of stress that I've been through the last few years. And basically my body trying to reach a level of homeostasis has meant that I've been quite unwell. Physically, like mentally very well for the most part, but physically a little bit unwell. And me, despite me trying to eat my best and exercise and move my body and being in the sunshine, I've never managed to get to that level of health that I do believe I deserve and I can achieve. And that's one of the reasons why I began taking supplements, and then I found that the supplements weren't really working. And there was a time earlier this year when I was really low in B12, I had to start taking a jab, which I never thought I would do. I had to start taking really severe iron supplements. I was quite anemic. I was quite unwell for a few weeks. And I've been taking supplements and doing the best I can and getting in all the vegetables and grains and beans, etc. that can promise me these things, but I've not really been able to move myself back into full health. And that's one of the other reasons why, with all of this coming together right now with regards to me restricting, but also to recognize, like, I am not a martyr. The old Phoenix would have sacrificed my health at the expense of not eating animal products. It's just that, like, the old Phoenix would have sacrificed my wants, needs and desires to remain in a relationship that wasn't serving me or isn't serving me, you know, hence the abusive relationship I was in. And as I've healed myself and become more in my power and recognizing within myself what self-love actually means and what it entails, the more I realize that I have to put myself first. Everybody has to put themselves first. You know, as long as you're not purposely hurting somebody else, you have to put yourself first. And although some people may hear that and go, yeah, but you're purposely hurting an animal, I do believe that there are certain circumstances where my health is key important. If I'm running at 80% just so I can be morally and ethically sound with the vegans, I'm doing myself a disservice. I don't know how many years I'm shedding off of my life, and my life being reduced to 80%. That's not worth it for me. That's not something I feel proud of. I've literally been vegan for 25 years, and that's not to say I won't move back into veganism. Again, I'm taking each day as it comes. I'm not setting any set specific goals. I've already noticed my diet is predominantly plant-based vegan anyway. It's just from time to time I have egg, or from time to time I have a beef burger, or I have a piece of steak, or I have a piece of cake or some chocolate that has dairy in it. But predominantly it's a plant-based diet. And I'm only really eating what my body is asking me to eat. And I do believe, like, in the past I would have just gone, no, it doesn't matter because I have to be vegan, and I'd cling to this label and thought I was disgusting and I can't break away from that label, and that I'm wrong, and that I can't actually kind of step away from that. I would have stuck to that label despite the fact I was getting ill and iller and iller and iller. Just like in the abusive relationship, just hold out, because the idea of being by myself is just too much. And now I'm in a space where I have to really listen to what my body wants, and it's my truth. And there are some people that may go, oh, you could have tried X, Y, and Z, you could have done this, this, and this. But these are people who don't have any understanding of my day-to-day life, don't understand what it's like to live exactly where I live in this space in the Eastern world, don't understand what my actual contacts I have medically. The medical system here is very different. I don't have the same level of care and understanding as I do in the Western world. And I have tried X, Y, and Z. I mean, I'm not justifying myself. I'm choosing the right path for me, but I could almost see a lot of backlash of people saying, hey, you could have tried many more things, and maybe I could. But this is one of those things I made a decision on. It felt right in terms of healing my restriction, really allowing my body to absorb nourishment from where she needed to absorb nourishment from, which is super healing somatically. And also just being able to hold space for two opposing viewpoints and sit with the ambiguity of, like, wow, okay, this is really difficult. Like, I'm sitting here mindfully eating a steak, aware of where this steak has come from, understanding that this steak is on my plate through the murder of another being, and holding space for that in my system, whilst also holding space for how unwell I've been, and the fact that there's no right or wrong for me. Like, I'm making the decision. Nobody else knows me more than I know myself. And yeah, that's really my journey. I just wanted to share it because I do believe that I don't believe there is a right and wrong. I do believe that if we can try the best of what we know and we take each day as it comes and we learn and we grow and we allow ourselves the grace of being human, it's incredible what things can change. And as I said many times, 6 months ago, a year ago, the idea of not being vegan, of not even having that label above me, of even putting a piece of flesh into my mouth was not even something I would have fathomed. And I always say, you know, when it comes to healing, you know, I feel like I know most of the areas in which I need to heal from now. I just need to heal from them. And then sometimes new things come up. They're like, whoa, hang on a second. Whoa, I didn't even fathom that was going to come to the surface. And then you have to approach it in the best way you can. So this video is really podcast was just here to highlight like individuals experiencing disordered eating disorders, dysfunctional relationships with their body, etc. Like it's so much deeper than just you as an individual for a start. There's so much in the way of society and culture and oppression that play a part. And unfortunately, no matter how much you try and heal yourself internally, externally, there is still a lot that's going to have you questioning your worth as a person. And this is something I'll talk about extensively, but to actually walk the path that you wish to walk unapologetically, without placating to those who would judge you for not understanding you, not personalizing those comments that may come in from this video saying, hey, I can't believe you did this, you could have, whatever the comments that may come out. At the same time, even the positive comments, wow, it's amazing, thank you for sharing, even those comments, like this really is just me showcasing my journey. Moving away from plant-based because I needed this somatically. I really felt that this was at this moment in time where I needed to go. Tomorrow, I may be back onto a plant-based diet without even labeling it as a plant-based diet. I just am. Today has been plant-based at the moment. But this was a huge step for me. And I'm hoping maybe even some people listening to this podcast may resonate and go, wow, I didn't even think of it like that. Yeah, maybe my vegetarian and veganism is. Some people it's not. For example, my dad, my sister, and her partner, they have turned vegan in the last few years, and they're doing it from a space of complete moral and ethics. They're not doing it from a space of restriction, of trying to remove food from their diet to make them the smallest they can be, to make them insignificant, to take up as least amount of space as possible. They did it purely from an educated perspective that that's where they wanted to go. And I'm fully supportive of them, and they're fully supportive of me. And although that is a huge part of why I went vegan and vegetarian, the restriction is a part that I need to heal. And I need to heal that somatically. And I've been carrying around with this restriction in my body for 37 years on this planet. It's probably going to take me more than a couple of months to move myself through that, to teach my body on a somatic level, you are free to eat exactly what you want to eat. Because the second my mind goes, right, that's it, we've had 3 months now, back to the plant-based diet, I've now taken away the choice that my body has. And some of you may not even understand this on this level that I do. But yeah, I am currently transitioning, not really transitioning, I suppose. I'm not plant-based at the moment. I'm predominantly plant-based. I do eat eggs. I haven't felt compulsion to eat any animal flesh this week. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm just really learning what it feels like and what it means to listen to my body, and really navigating forward in my truth of what I need, regardless of the noise around me that may be telling me different ways and judging me and whatever that may be. So I hope that listening to this podcast may have educated you a little bit on something, may have allowed you to really sit on your viewpoints, what you believe. And I suppose I would just say as a closing question, when you hear me speaking about this, whether you're vegan or whether you're not vegan, whatever you identify as being, I just wondered how it feels in the body when you hear me say this. So I can imagine some vegans will hear me say this and will immediately want to judge something about my character or something about my choices in that way. I'm not saying all, just some. And I can imagine there are some people who are not plant-based perhaps, who will almost go, yes, see, I told you, like I confirmed to them the wrongs or the unhealthiness of a specific diet choice. So I'm just wondering, like, as you get to the end of this podcast and you reflect on, if you want to reflect on what you've taken from this podcast, but just, I wonder if you are able to hold space for both opposing and for viewpoints, or many viewpoints I've shared, without needing to side more with one or the other. Just like holding space for it. Okay, she thinks this, she's done this, this is her truth. Can you just hold space for it? There's no judgment if you can or cannot, it's just a little practice. And I hope that you've enjoyed my first episode of the Messiness of Everything, which has been recorded twice, because the first time I had the fan in the background, and technically I should have posted it because that's messy as well, but I figured that people would not like to listen to a fan in the background. But please subscribe. This podcast will be coming out every fortnight with lots and lots of really juicy topics. And yeah, thank you very much for sticking out to the end. Until next time.